So I just finished Bleach, and it's probably one of my favorite verses that I've been in. I've also read the light novels, and if you're wondering if you should read these, my answer to that is yes, especially if you wanted to see more of the characters that didn't come back to in the conclusion of Volume 74. And also if you're interested in any of the lore about the Soul Society, the Soul King, and the Four Noble Clans, you should absolutely read this. But again, just so you're aware, it is a light novel, so there are more words than art. The art that's in here, though, is still beautiful, as always, expected nothing less. I will get more into that later, but if you were curious about that, that would be my answer. This is just a warning. I'm not going to get into spoilers if you have not seen Bleach. If there's anything that I think might be a little iffy, I'm going to zoom the screen out like this, and when we come back into regular stuff that I know is safe, I will bring it back to normal. So that will be your warning. So this is the official verbal, and then you'll have the visual. I will do my best not to get into spoilers in this video, but I want to talk about this because none of my friends have gotten this far, and I don't think they will, which is unfortunate. I just want to yap. So for context, Bleach is the first of the big three that I've actually finished, and I say that because when I was younger, I was watching the release of Naruto when it was coming out, but when I was in middle school and high school, if you watched anime, you got made fun of, and it wasn't like little jokes here and there that you still might see. People were getting bullied, and I had enough going on in my little teenage years that I didn't want any of the smoke from anybody about watching that. So I was a coward and gave up something that I liked because I feared other people's opinions. But also, people were really mean about it. I'm just gonna leave it at that. If you still watched it, even though you got made fun of, you're definitely a stronger person. Because again, I didn't want any part of that. So first of the big three that I've actually finished, and I loved it. I loved everything about this verse. I watched the first 3 episodes in November, and I texted my friends saying, wow, I think I'm actually really going to enjoy this verse. This is going to be good, because I did watch JJK and I really liked it, and I know Gege was influenced a lot by Bleach. And I could tell by the ideas just going on that I thought it was going to be really cool. And episode 4, I did not watch until March. I don't know what it was, I just didn't go back to it. Actually, a part of it was I did not have Hulu at the time, and I was using Hulu on my sister's TV to watch it. And then I left. So that was kind of a part of it, but I will admit at first I didn't have anything pulling me back in to go and finish it. And then as I was building out the van, there were 2 to 3 days where it was just pouring rain, and I was like, you know what? I was getting so much shit from my friend John about being like, oh, I'm gonna watch Bleach, I'm gonna finish it, and I just didn't. So he was giving me a lot of crap about it. So I put it on, and I was a little iffy at first, and then I got to the episode where Ruki gets taken, and I was like, oh, okay, this is getting spicy. And it just went from there. I did the math, and I think is either 19 or 21 hours of Bleach that I watched straight just because it was raining outside. And was I disgusted a little bit of how much I watched during those 2 days? Yeah, but I also didn't regret it at all. I love the Soul Society arc. I thought it was amazing. Super cool characters with a mission, and there was a lot of fighting. And I know Bleach is all about hands, and I love that. I wouldn't trade it for the world. If I'm going to do anything about this verse, I'm going to glaze it, honestly, because and I don't doubt that it's not going to be good, but if Thousand Year Blood War does really, really well for the last part, we have to hype this up so this gets animated, because I think this would be so cool to get onto screen. Diving a little ahead of myself, so quickly into the Soul Society arc, my favorite characters were Urahara and Yurishi. And Ichigo at first was not one of my characters that I liked. I was like, okay, he's the main character, he's cool. I didn't really appreciate him until we got more into the series, though. And now I can say he's probably one of my favorite main characters. Going into the Soul Society arc, my favorite captains, one immediately was Hitsugaya. I thought, as soon as we met him, we saw how strong he was. He was just a prodigy. I was like, oh, something's gonna happen, and he's gonna have like a little bit of a downfall, but then like the comeback he's gonna have is amazing. And while I was kind of wrong about that, he was still a super strong character, and I liked him as he progressed anyway. I also immediately like I always mess this up. If I go on a tangent and I mispronounce something and you know what I'm talking about, please don't be the guy. It's like, bup, bup, bup. Just go with it, please. Anyways, I also really like Shunsui when we were introduced to him, and I think it was so funny that people going into it, I even thought that Chad stood a chance, but R.I.P. Chad for that. God, that was so funny. Like, even just talking about it now, I know I just finished it. I feel like I could watch it again. That's just how it is for me. I feel like this could definitely just be a comfort show. I'm probably gonna end up even watching the filler. Oh, going into that, I know that there's an arc that I'm probably going to watch that goes into a little bit that goes into about the Zanpakutos. Yeah, I'm probably gonna end up watching that just because it gives you a lot of information, and I'm lore curious. Curiosity gets the best of me. But some of my favorite parts from the Soul Society arc was, of course, Zangetsu's speech about the rain. Iconic. I also really loved Urahara's speech to, or maybe not speech, but more of a lesson to Ichigo talking about fear and the differences of fear between them. When he says, you want to protect your friends, but it's out of fear, while I'm over here more confident about it. I'm going to protect my friends and nothing's going to happen to them. And it's not based off of fear. And it's kind of where you see Ichigo starting to grow. And I think not that it's cool, but I like having a main character where he is struggling where he's supposed to struggle. He didn't immediately go into Soul Society or even meeting Byakuya and Renji for the first time. He didn't win. And he had to work for it to get to where he was. And I love that kind of stuff because one of the things that kind of bothers me about any novel or anime is when someone does not have any kind of qualification and they shouldn't be winning at things, much less still be alive. And all of a sudden, there's like this huge plot armor thing, and here they are. That kind of bothers me. So I like that he had to work through it. I was also I texted my friend David about it. I had such a hard time with names at first in this. And Byakuya for a very long time for me was Captain Flower Boy. Which I guess was kind of disrespectful, but whatever. I know his name now. But I did not like him at all at first, especially because he had beef with Yorichi. So I was like, man, this guy, like, come on. What are we doing here? But he redeemed himself, so it's okay. I'm just remembering stuff and how I felt. I loved the character intros for the captains and what we got to see of them at first. And I also, the soundtracks for this were amazing. Another one of my favorite parts was when Ichigo arrived in Soul Society to save Rukia from the execution. When he just appears, music starts playing. I got literal chills at that moment. I just love this series so much. I'm gonna keep hyping it up. If you haven't gotten that impression yet, this is me again telling you I'm going to hype this series up because I think it's deserving of it. I just had such a fun time. As much as I enjoyed this arc, though, it took me another 3 months to move into the Arrancar arc. I did go through this skipping a lot of the filler, most of the filler, and I don't really regret it. But now that I'm like going into stuff and just curious about things, you can learn some lore from the filler arcs. Like I said, I want to go back to the one about the Zanpakutos, but it took me a little bit to get into the Ronka arc, and I think just because I watched so much of the Soul Society arc at once, I kind of burned myself out a little bit. But lesson learned, not really, because I did the same thing again, and we moved into the Ronka arc. Before we move on, though, just going back, my introduction, like the intro to Hisagi when he first showed up on screen, I thought he was going to be an asshole just because his character design. I also thought he was going to be more prominent, but he's more of a side character. He definitely has like this main character design, but he's more of a side character until we get to this part of the series, which again we'll get into later. But I immediately loved him seeing him on screen. I texted my friend Jess. I was like, "Is everybody in Bleach super cool?" Like the character design, artwork, all the time. I was just immediately in love. I already knew going into the Ronka arc that I was going to like Grimjaw, and I knew who Nell was, and I had a feeling I was going to like her as well. However, I had no idea who Okiura is, and I think he's probably one of my favorite characters ever in the series. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but the Ironclaw arc as a whole is probably my favorite, just because of the characters that were in it, how certain people had to grow to meet their missions. I unfortunately will say, Orihime, I just straight up disliked her at first. It probably says something about me, but if there's like a super weak character that all I do is cry, and she's so positive, and I know why she was like that, but she just, for a while, it really just grinds my gears. But I don't know, I feel bad saying it, but yeah. I'm just gonna leave that where it is. She grew on me, but not enough to be one of my favorite characters of the verse. The character entrances, though, is one of my favorites in the whole verse is Grimjaw. Like, him coming in, and when you go into the scene too, when you just see the sky and then you're coming through the hole, like, they pan out and you're going through the hole in his stomach and you just see everything. First of all, the camera work, amazing. But everything was just so cool. The soundtracks for this was so fun. I was having such a good time. And I'll even I'll even say, before you judge me, I know it doesn't really make sense for me to have this in the van with me, but this is the box set for the arc. And why I got this in the first place was because I knew there were panels that I would want to try to recreate when I start drawing again. And as I was going through, everything that I wanted to draw was in different volumes. By the time I picked out everything that I wanted, I had pretty much a whole row and then some. So at that point I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna keep it. And going through this, it just really made me want to read it again. I have no regrets. Yeah, so Ulquiorra, one of my favorite characters ever. I think I liked Ulquiorra so much because there was, at the very end before he was killed, you saw such a big change for him and you saw the potential that he could have, and then he died. And while I hate that, I think it made me love him that much more because there was so much more of an impact on what you could see potentially happening, or he could have maybe not been as bad in his mindset for things. And I really do think that's what made me love him so much more. And he's probably my favorite Espada. I came in thinking that Grimjaw was going to be absolutely number one, no one can tell me anything, and it is Ulquiorra. And I know I'm not anything special, a lot of people love Ulquiorra, but here we are. There's been a lot of back and forth about if Ichigo should be with Rukia or Orihime, and I will say, watching the Arrancar arc, Ichigo turns into the absolute thing that he detests because Orihime needs him, calls out to him, verge of death, and he comes back as what he hates to protect her. And I feel like that sets a pretty large precedent of how it's supposed to be. Also, when he does save Rukia, the way he handles them are different. He does not let Orihime go, but when he saves Rukia, he's throwing her to Renji. So I think there's a little bit of a difference, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later because I do have some more opinion on that. But I just had such a fun time. Meeting Charlotte had me cackling. One of my favorite episodes in this was 146. I was laughing so hard when they went into Heko Mundo and we met Nell, Donda Chakra, and Pesh. I laughed so hard at this episode. I was having such a good time. Getting to see Aizen, he's probably, again, I know I'm not original, Aizen's probably one of my favorite villains, but if you want more of Aizen, you also need to read this. You need to read the light novels. Again, I'll get into it later. And I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping back and forth with that, but I just love him as a character. I love it so much. And there's still so much that could be like, you could still go, if he wanted to, Kubo could still go into so much about all of this, and I just think that makes it that much more cool. Well, okay, the Fullbringer arc, I did have mixed feelings on it, but it was, I would say, the only arc where I really, really just felt for Ichigo. He lost his powers, he can't protect his friends, and that's been the biggest thing since we met him. He's just wanted to be able to protect the people that he loves, and he had a means to do that. And after he fought Aizen, he consciously made the decision to do what he needed to do, knowing that he'd lose his powers. And now he doesn't have that, and you can just see it on his face how drained he is, and it made me sad. That arc made me so sad for Ichigo, where after Soul Society, when Ishida lost his Quincy powers and he was sad, I didn't really feel it for him. I didn't, especially when his dad was like, oh, if you make this deal with me, I'll give you your powers back. And I know the whole thing about Ishida just doing what he needs to, but I did not really connect with Ishida as much, especially at that point in the story, as I did with Ichigo. And I just think, like, wrapping up this arc and seeing how he was able to move through that and get through that with his friend's help, I thought it was really special. I also see a lot of people talk about if that arc is technically filler or not, and you should definitely watch it because it comes more into play at the end of Thousand Year Blood War and in the time gap in the light novel series. If you read them, it'll just make more sense if you watch it. So I think that you should. Besides that, though, I didn't really definitely wasn't a favorite of mine. If I had to pick a favorite Fullbringer, it'd be Tsukujima. I just thought it was so heartbreaking to see him too when his friends lost his memories and he ends up getting stabbed, and he just turns around and sees Ishin and Urahara, and he's like, not you guys too, and he's just crying. And then you realize it was to get his powers back, but just seeing Ichigo that down bad, I didn't like it. I was feeling so hard for my boy. I also really love that Yama made the exception to be able to transfer powers back to him, and I didn't really like Yama at first. I thought he was really cool in Thousand Year Blood War. Going into Thousand Year Blood War, I didn't really wait like I did with the other arcs. I kind of was at a point where I could just steadily watch it through because majority of this was done and I was tired, so I was watching Bleach because I was so sucked in at that point that nothing else was happening. I had seen who this character was. I knew immediately I was not going to say his name right. I can listen to stuff and I can read things fine. Pronouncing them is just where I struggle apparently, but I I think I opted to call him Michelin Mustache Man instead. And my friends knew what I was talking about, so I didn't really care. But what an interesting concept with how everything tied together with the Quincy's and how this all played out. And as so it's hard. I'm gonna tread very, very lightly with Thousand Year Blood War because I know the last season is coming out next year. But how everything ties together with the Quincy's, I think, is so cool, and it brings up a lot of questions which can be expanded on in side stories, which I think is amazing, and I hope more of it gets done like the light novels or like a serialized manga. There's also, actually, hold on. Let me not talk about that yet because I'll talk about it later. But Thousand Year Blood War. My favorite Quincy, Asnot, and the poison dude. I'm blanking on his name. I don't know why I'm picking that up like it's gonna tell me. Oh, random. Another thing that I really liked in the Ironclaw arc is when Hitsugaya meets Hiyori and they argue, and I think that's so funny, and I wish we saw more of that duo. Askin Naklavar, I think his character is really funny, but my favorite Quincy would be Asnot, even though he looks like the Grudge and was kind of scary. I thought his characterization was so cool, and I really, really love characters who think they have a godlike power or like their reason for anything is above anyone else's reason for trying to do something, and then they have a downfall. I love seeing it. Also, at this point now, I've realized that Rukia, once she makes up with Byakuya, is saved so many times. Pretty much almost every fight she has by his Bankai. Her Bankai. Oh, so cool. I loved her Bankai. I was so happy she got a strong one, but you could definitely see how it could be dangerous to her if she doesn't control it right. That's another thing I think I do appreciate though about this series is they have strong female characters, and in a lot of the ones that I've seen already, that's not consistently the case, which I think is unfortunate. So I can appreciate that the female characters are strong in this. I'm just to be able to speak freely, I am going to zoom out here just because I'm going to talk about up into the just because I'm going to talk about the end of what was animated. I thought him finally learning about his mom and being able to connect the dots and why he couldn't have an Asauchi was so important, and I love that he was able to learn and his dad was able to tell him, and that just made everything click. He found out who he was. He wasn't having, even though it didn't really seem like he was having an identity crisis, he didn't have to have one of those, which I thought was pretty cool for him. And the fact he dual wields, and the fact that making it took a whole ocean, I thought was insane. Absolutely bananas. I also kind of thought it was funny that Squad Zero got messed up. Even like Osho. See, once I have like a nickname for a character, it's so. Yeah, Osho means priest. So Ichibe, I called him Mustache Picasso. Yeah, I also forgot where I was gonna go with that. Oh, Squad Zero got packed up, and I thought it was kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's why I thought about Mustache Man. Both Mustache Mans. Men. I also thought it was insane that Aizen got that much stronger while he was in confinement. The man knows no bounds besides the ones all over his body. I wanted to see more of him. I almost honestly wanted to see him break out of the chair. But the fact that he was so powerful in the chair is kind of scary. Again, one of my favorite villains ever. One thing I will say, if you want to read Thousand Year Blood War before the next season comes out, because as you saw with JJK, the trailer came out and then there were spoilers everywhere, which I thought was super unfortunate. It was also why as soon as I finished the Shibuya arc for JJK, I read the rest of everything. So if you want to read the rest of Bleach, there is a Reddit thread saying you should just buy the box set. And my friend John and I talked about it. I was like, hey, I found it on sale. If we split it, we're only spending $60 and can have the whole box set, because they just recommended you read the whole thing because there's a lot of things that are different. And that's what we did. And I will say, don't fall for that, because it isn't until I think it was volume 68 or 69 that it doesn't follow the exact sequence that the anime does. However, it's just in different orders. So you don't really see anything new until I think it was like maybe it's either the beginning to middle of volume 73 or the middle of volume 72 forward. So you could really just buy the last two volumes and you would know everything that happened up until the anime. So you don't need to spend that money unless you want to, but it's not necessary. And I guess that's on me for not doing as much research into it, but there were a few people saying the same thing, so I thought, okay, let's do that. And like I said, it wasn't until volume 68 or 69 that the sequencing was different, but it was still the same information. And it didn't go past any of the new stuff that was not included. So there is that cutoff. The cutoff is the same. It's just out of sequence compared to the manga. War ends. There's a gap of time between the war ending and the actual ending in volume 74. And that is where the 3 light novels come in. Can't Figure Your Own World, volumes 1, 2, and 3. I really enjoyed these 3 light novels. I do think it's a shame that it is a different kind of media for someone to consume who's used to reading manga. Because I know from my friends, we've been in stores before and they go, oh, this looks really cool, takes it off the shelf. This has a lot of words, shuts it immediately. And then I have friends who just don't read David. So I do think it's kind of a shame that it's in this format. However, I still really enjoyed it and would recommend it because in that time period and to the end of the novel, we don't get updates on some of the characters after the war, which I think is one of the things I was kind of disappointed in because I wanted to know what happened to certain characters, and it's kind of mid to end of battle and then there's just nothing and you don't get an update. You have to read this for an update, or you could just go on the internet, ask people on the internet and be like, hey, what happened? And they'll tell you. But I think that was really one of the only disappointing things that I thought about Bleach. But now that I have these novels, I'm like, okay, I can kind of overlook it, but I do wish that some of this was included in the final volumes just to get the update about the characters so you didn't have to read these if you didn't want to. I feel like that's a fair thing to say. So I know I said earlier I immediately loved Hisagi when we met him just because of his character design. I thought he looked really cool, and whatever, shall call it what you will. But I thought it was really funny because after I finished this, I thought about it for a second, and the whole joke about Renji the Stoppable kind of him too, because a lot of the fights that he gets in, he also gets packed up and folded like laundry. And I know everybody's excuse for Renji is like half his fights were against Ichigo or like super strong people, and he did fight strong people too. But he's not as strong as any of the main characters' casts. I still love him. I think he's so fun. So basically in this, there's a 10-year gap between the end of the war and the end of volume 74. And what happens is a new antagonist gets introduced, and his name is Tokunada. Let me try to pronounce his last name. Tsunaya Shiro, which is one of the 4 noble clans, and he becomes the head of it. I will say one of my most disliked characters in this verse is Tosen. I really didn't understand how he could have this sense of justice and still do what he did during the whole Soul Society and Arrancar arcs and the time before any of that arcs existed, and still think that he's upholding his friend's justice. This did not make me like him, but it made me understand him. And there's so much that these 3 volumes in particular connect in the series, which was really cool. This is the man that killed Tosen's best friend's Kakyo, who you don't get introduced to, you just know he's a noble, and it's not until here that you learn who he is. And Tosen strongly connected to Hisagi, obviously, because Tosen was his captain, and he kind of helped. He made the path for Hisagi to become who he was today as a Soul Reaper. And when people describe Hisagi, he is what you would envision as a Soul Reaper. If someone was talking about a Soul Reaper and it was like a definition of a picture of what they envisioned, it would be him. And he's more of the main character of this, and in all 3 of these volumes, it's not anybody from the main cast. So if you look at, like, I have all the color but black, right? But the black. And the artwork is like the main people who Ichigo fights with, the main captains. This series kind of focuses on the other captains and side characters that were involved, minus Kenpachi Zaraki, because he wants the smoke all the time. So obviously he's going to be there where there's smoke. He'll never duck a fade. Respect. So you get to dive a little bit deeper into Hisagi and Tosen's relationship, and it also brings in the dynamic with this homeboy and this kid, Hakone, and other things, and you get a lot of lore and background stuff from the 4 noble clans. You get insight about why Aizen was so upset with Soul Society and you also end up learning everything that you want to know about the Soul King. And it's actually really cool to think about, like looking at this as a whole, because Aizen's reason makes sense. Aizen is definitely one of the villains that if you put into a picture and like tries to change the world but fails, that whole, I think it would be Aizen and Light for sure. And I haven't watched Code Geass, but I think Maluk, I think that's his name, but I've heard he's also succeeded. So tries to change the world for a certain reason, and it's not necessarily a bad reason. And you get so much more. Just in the beginning, you see when he's getting re-imprisoned and he speaks to Asagi, his words have so much meaning throughout these three novels, and to connecting everything is insane. And the cool part is, like I said, there can be so many branches even off this alone, not including the main Bleach series. I love this genuinely so much. I had a lot of fun. It was a little different going to read a light novel compared to manga, because while it was very fast moving, there was also a lot that had to be said so you could picture everything. So it was like a mix of a fast pace, but also maybe lengthier descriptions. I don't know kind of how to explain it. Still a good time. I would still highly recommend, especially if you're a Bleach enthusiast. Also, if you're at all curious about his Bankai, because that is mentioned but not expanded, all you find out in volume 74 is he says, "Hey, I've learned Bankai, like I have it." This is the whole situation where he learns it, and it's here in volume 3, or yeah, I'm just going to call it a volume, in volume 3, and there's a picture of it, and wow, 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 what a Bankai this is. It's so cool, but like I know they say that your Bankai manifests as a power like in relation to the user, and it kind of like expresses who they are. And I get that, but it also just really sucks for him. It's cool, but ow. So yeah, I just had a great time with Bleach. I This is probably one of the verses for me that I'm just going to be stuck on because I had such a fun time with it. For any of you wondering, no, I haven't started One Piece yet. Please, I will start it eventually on my own time. 1,000 episodes is commitment, and that is not something I have right now. I just really like Bleach, and if anybody wants to talk to me about it. Oh, also, I know, jumping around again. Oh, two things I just remembered. So there is a third. These are the official character books. So this is the first and the second. There is a third one called Unmasked that has Ulquiorra on it. And I don't think there is any copies in English from what I saw, but I believe there's a link for it. There's Ulquiorra's backstory in that. And even the Japanese versions, I mean the only version, they're super hard to find, but you have Ulquiorra's backstory. You should definitely Google that because it's amazing. If I could find the link, I will put it down in the description. It's just so good. I love it. This might be a hot take. I thought going back to the Iranka arc, Yami's reveal was kind of very underwhelming. I yapped so much that my mic actually died, the receiver. So, I think the last thing that got recorded was talking about Okira's backstory. Oh. Smartest guy in the verse, in my humble opinion, is Rudoban. I don't know how to say his last name, but he's from the Iranka arc. For this guy, right here. Unohana pulls up. She says, "Hey, we're not here to fight. We're here to heal people." Man looks at her and says, "Okay," turns around. Done. Not fighting. Smart guy. Trying to remember what I had said, because there's like 5 minutes that got cut off. One of the things I know that got cut off for sure is we're gonna zoom out for 1,000 Year Blood War, but I will always be a sucker for people who love each other and then they can never be together, or they love each other and they find out too late. Gin and Matsumoto. Oh my god. I was so upset. I don't know. I love to hate that kind of thing, I guess, but I never really felt a type of way towards Gin. I was like, okay, he's a villain. He's just following Aizen. I don't really have a lot of information about him. He's kind of just an asshole. And then you learn why, and he never got to help her. And the last thing that this man sees before he dies is the girl he loves crying over his face. Hello? Like, oh, man, I was feeling a type of way after that one for sure. That one hurt my feelings. And I think he is in the Hell arc, not arc, the movie. Pretty sure it's a movie. I do have to watch that. That's the one thing that I need to watch. Memories of Nobody. So that is mentioned in, I think it's volume 74, but it could be 73. It's the Valley of Screams. If you want to know what they're talking about, watch that movie, Memories of Nobody. Free with ads on Pluto TV. I'm gonna say this again because I'm not sure if it was in the other video. My mic got cut off. So I'm gonna say it again. A few things that I was kind of, I don't want to say disappointed because I still liked everything overall, but it kind of didn't make sense to me in the end. We're zoomed out again. Ishida ends up being a doctor when he clearly states why he doesn't want to be a doctor. And Chad ends up being a boxer, which kind of goes against everything that his character was throughout the series. Like, I get needing to make money. It's an easy way to make money, but I never thought that that's would be what he turned to. And then from what we see, Orihime is just a mom, but even when she went with Ulquiorra, she says all these things that she wants to at least try to do, like being an astronaut, and then we just get that she's a mom. And I know it's also very consistent with Ichigo's character. All he wanted to do was protect, but we never got anything about what he wanted to do in the future, which was said in the Fullbringer arc, so I didn't expect anything really different, but it would have been nice to see what else he got into, like what other goals he might have besides being a Soul Reaper. I just feel like I never got really any, like, I know Ichigo cared about Orihime a lot. Like I said before, he became the one thing he detested and gave into it to protect her, but I never really got like that much of a romantic connection between the two, and this kid's an idiot. He did not know. I did think it was really funny though when Chad was trying to hype up Orihime and then was like, hey Ichigo, what do you think of her outfit? And he didn't really know what to say, and then it got weird because he was like, well, I don't know, it's a little revealing. I thought that whole sequence was funny. But yeah, I really enjoyed Bleach. I thought it was a great time, and if you're curious, you should watch it too. Definitely recommend the character books. I recommend the light novels, and I've been really enjoying the art book that I have, just extra stuff. This is like the main squad. It doesn't include a lot of people on the side characters that the light novels do. This is more of the main people around Ichigo. But it's still really nice. I can't wait to use these characters as my like main drawing stuff. Like, I love. If you want to talk to me about Bleach, just let me know, and I will see you next video.